All right, hello, folks, and welcome to day 8 in our Discovery Series of our Black Friday events and becoming a functional health practitioner. Glad to see you guys. I will wait to see everyone tuning in. Already people saying hello in the chat. You guys are great. Welcome and good morning. Also, you know what is also happening on day 8 is I still cannot for the life of me figure out why I look so red. I promise I do not have a sunburn that just never goes away. I must have messed up something with my lighting, and I actually I'll give you guys a little hint. I like to let people tune in first, so I'll give you my little behind the scenes here. What really has occurred, because I know when it changed, is this is a fake background. I don't know if you guys realize that. Maybe you do. But this is fake. I can edit it and change it as I want. So that window right there that's in this image, there's a real window there. So that's kind of helps create the illusion. Now, when I originally had these folks create this for us, the window was open. And so he kind of adjusted my lighting for me as if the window was open. Well, I realized it was kind of annoying, especially midday to host. So I added these blackout curtains. And the second that I added them, I became red. And I don't understand that because this is above my pay grade, as you can tell. These are very white lights. I don't understand why that would make me red. So we're still figuring that out here on day 8 of the Discovery Series. But that's my little behind the scenes stuff for you. So what are we going to be doing today? So for this particular session, we are going to be actually replaying a case study from our Holistic Health Week. And that is for kind of a sad reason, if I'm being honest, but she shared it publicly. So I don't mind being transparent about it. Everything's going a little bit better right now. This was originally supposed to be a case study session with Jen Sino, and she promoted this herself, actually. Very late last week, her husband got into a super serious car accident. Kind of an incredible story for a variety of reasons. She, again, shared this all publicly. They live in Canada, and I guess they're kind of in the back roads. And so he was on a very dark back road driving at night, and he crashed badly. By himself. There was no other cars involved at the moment. And she actually even said that the road itself doesn't have a lot of people going down it. Not to mention, I've never been to Canada, but it's Canada in November. I would have to imagine all parts of it are pretty cold and some of it are just freaking freezing. And so she shared on Instagram that Chris, her husband, remembers he got into the accident, got completely knocked out. And he remembers hearing, this is what he says, he remembers hearing, wake up, wake up, wake up. And there's no one there. It's just him. All he remembers is hearing, wake up, wake up, wake up. And that got him out of what was happening and when he passed out in the car. And this gets more incredible as you continue to hear it. So he gets up out of the car and starts walking to go find someone to help him and flag a thing down because this is not a busy road at all. And he successfully does that. Now, what's nuts and insane about all of this is that Chris, I don't understand the full extent of the injuries, but I know that the injuries are bad enough that there was talks about, like, is this guy paralyzed to begin with? And then the video I saw of him recently, he is walking with a walker. Like, it's going to be a long process, guys. Like, he's doing okay, but it's going to be a long process. Barely able to walk on his own. In 11 out of 10 pain, Jen said. And that's after all the stuff and being cared for. So here's a question for you. Where the heck did the wake up, wake up, wake up come from? And how the heck is he walking down the road, flagging down help in that moment when he can't even walk after he's already gotten the treatment in the hospital? I don't know. That kind of stuff confuses me. I always find it fascinating. And I'm just very happy that he's alive and overall okay. Jen has a brand new baby that was born in the last couple of years, and they have another baby on the way. I also have to say this about Jen. This is the last thing I'll say before we get into the case study, and hi to everyone tuning in. I do see the chat. Jen is the type of person, she messages me late at night on Monday of this week. So this all happened late last week. Her husband is in the hospital, can barely walk. This guy's going through surgeries and all this kind of stuff. He was in a freaking coma, I think, for like 12 hours. And she messages me on Monday night, and she's dead serious. She's like, oh, hey, I'm good for Wednesday. I'm texting her, what do you mean good for Wednesday? She's like, oh, I can do my case study on Wednesday. And I'm thinking, is this woman out of her mind? In a good way, right? And so I actually sent an audio message to her so she can hear my tone. I said, Jen, you do not need to be doing this case study on Wednesday. You are crazy, man. Like, you're not letting anyone down. And the reason that I worded it that way is just so you guys know what type of person she is. She has shared this publicly. She's been a keynote speaker for us before, and she was on our business success sessions last year in summer open house, or I'm sorry, actually this year in summer open house. She's a 7-figure FDN guy. She's in her early 30s, mid 30s now, I think. And I mean, she has a business that does, upwards of 2 million plus a year. She is very, very successful, very smart, very hardworking, and has been maintaining this for several years. So why am I saying that? This woman does not need to come on and do a case study to maybe get a handful of clients or some Black Friday referrals or whatever it is. That's not changing her life at all. She's not even thinking about that. So literally, she was going to come on Wednesday while she's pregnant with a relatively new baby already, and that has to care for that as well. And her husband was just in a coma, just so she doesn't let people down for a 90-minute session where we can easily do a replay of another case study. That's just the type of person that she is. Probably why she has the success that she has, because I can't even comprehend that level of thinking that you're going to text me saying you're good for Wednesday. There was no part of me that assumed that she was going to be presenting the case study on Wednesday. So obviously we told her that is completely unnecessary and extremely nice of her to even think about doing that, let alone saying that she wanted to do that for us. So we told her all good. She's still claiming to me that she wants to be snuck in into next week and do a case study then. We will let you guys know if that happens. I am continuously trying to tell her that she does not need to do that, and it is up to her discretion completely. We don't want to not let her in either. We certainly don't want to punish her for having a serious event happen in her life. That would be equally ridiculous. But we're going back and forth with that, and we'll get it all figured out. So with all that said, again, thanks for being here and letting me kind of do my spiel, if you will. We're going to have a case study right now from our Holistic Health Week. This is very recent. It was done in October of this year. We are replaying it. This is the placement filler for Jen Sino's original case study that she was going to do. And after that, on this same stream, I'm positive, if you guys were on yesterday, we had a mishap with that. We did fix that for today. So this is all on the same stream. We are doing a live course tour right after this. That is not pre-recorded. It's a live course tour. Our COO is actually coming on. We are going to show you guys exactly what is in the FDN course, and then we will go through your questions. And if you haven't heard somehow, maybe it's your first session tuning in, remember, we are doing our biggest sale ever in FDN history. It's been around since 2008. This is the biggest sale in history. We're doing $2,000 off the course. It started on November 10th. It ends at the end of the day on December 1st, and that is California time, Pacific time, 11:59 p.m. PST on Monday, December 1st is when the sale ends. You don't need any special links. It's right on our website. I can give you a link, though, just to help you out here, fdntraining.com/BF25. There you go. Awesome comments here. I love the faith. I think that's all I can make of it too, guys. It's so weird how such a tragic situation can have such amazing and beautiful parts to it. Especially the wake up thing. I get that could be a subconscious thing, man, but that's too weird to me. It's cool. I like that stuff. So we're going to get this replay going, and then we will do a course tour with Brandy Buskow, our COO. So I hope that you guys enjoy this. This case study is fantastic. We selected this specifically because of audience feedback. It's on a pretty niche subject, too. It's on mesh implant illness. Now, you probably know someone in your life who has had a hernia, had certain surgeries. We actually believe a lot of what Sharon is about to present on overlaps with breast implant illness as well. So really, any implant is subject to causing some of the issues that Sharon is going to talk about today, but she's also has some solutions. So let's get this shared here, and I'm excited to get you guys to hear this. All right, 1 second. Here you guys go. I hope you enjoy. Sharon Surita, PhD, is an environmental engineer turned functional health practitioner and the founder of Functionally Enlightened. As a board-certified functional diagnostic nutrition coach, she specializes in bio-individual recovery from implant illness, systems-based detoxification, and nervous system regulation. Drawing on both research and lived experience, Sharon helps clients translate complex labs into simple daily rhythms that restore function and agency. Her forthcoming book, Meshed Up, that is an awesome title, A Guide to Healing from Implant Illness, blends science, story, and practical tools to support sustainable healing. Well, welcome to Holistic Health Week, and when the heck is the book going to be out?
I am hoping in the beginning of the year. It's in third round of edit, so it's been an ongoing process. I think probably about 6 years of working on it piece by piece.
Okay, Sharon, on a separate note, we would love any FDN that writes a book and puts that time in. We'd love to send that out to our entire email list. So make sure you email me afterwards and we can help promote that once you are ready to go. Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
With that said, uh, I want to get your screen share tested out here. Make sure you're all good to go. I know it's a little harder when we transition you in fully live. So let's see if you are able to share and how it's all looking. While Sharon's doing that, I want to welcome Jenna back. Jenna is going to be in the chat with me as well. So if you see her and you're wondering, who's this Jenna woman? She's helping out with links, questions that you guys might have, and all that good stuff. Perfect. It looks like this was shared full screen. Everything looks great on my end. And Sharon, what I do while you're presenting, at least, I go off audio and video just out of respect to not be distracting. If anything glitches or any issues, we haven't had any this week, so don't worry. I'll be right back in, but otherwise the floor is yours and we'll have the time to do Q&A at the end. Same thing as all the other sessions, guys. If you have questions as we're going along through this, please use the Q&A feature. It helps me prioritize it. I know we didn't get to everything last time, but we got pretty close. We did really well in that session. So that Q&A feature is going to be in a little annotation box with a question mark symbol. You go in there, you type your question, and then we go in order once Sharon is finished. So the floor is yours, my friend, and good luck. I'm excited to hear this.
All right, I appreciate it, Evan, and I appreciate everyone being here. I know I have spoke on this topic several times, and the questions just keep coming. So I'm really glad to be presenting this case and hopefully can get eyes on it. With just a background introduction, Detective Ev already introduced me as an environmental engineer. I have about 23 years of experience with that, and the emphasis was really on toxicology, on environmental contaminants, and on human health risk. So it wasn't until 2019 that I became mesh implant injured myself, and that kind of changed the whole trajectory of my life, my career. I was bedbound for several months and homebound for several years after. But aside from that, that's really where my focus changed into functional health. I went around the trajectory of the conventional practice so many times, and finally I decided it's time to really advocate for myself, learn everything I need to know about all of the pieces. And I'm sure you've all listened to other speakers today and yesterday even. They've all discussed how FDN really brings all those hidden stressors out and lets people really analyze where there's problems. So to go back to what I did, again, it was during that time when I was ill that I realized that there was very little support existing for other people who were suffering from environmental illness or implant related illnesses. And so I redirected my scientific training into that world of functional medicine. With that, you can see here that beyond that professional identity that I carry, I am a mother of two boys. One's in high school, one's still in elementary, so a big age gap keeps me very busy. And I am the wife of a now retired Coast Guardsman, and as well as the implant illness warrior and advocate for all of those who are in the system and don't get the help that they're looking for. So now that you see a little bit about what I do, I want to get into the case study that will go into why environmental and biological factors are really central to chronic illness. But as Detective Ev already asked, if you are familiar with mesh implant illness, I saw was a good mix of ones and twos in there. So just I had a question for you all, and maybe you can answer in the chat, was how many of you have personally witnessed how an exposure to a toxic chemical or how a medical device implant has impacted someone's life? That's a question that I always ask because we may or may not make that connection. So I will go forward with the presentation, hopefully see some of those comments coming in. So in this case study, we'll go over some of the foundational labs that we use in FDN. This is an older client, probably started with me about 2 years ago. So with that being said, we went through the metabolic typing diet, the metabolic wellness profile. There's a mucosal barrier assessment and a stress and hormone panel. She came in with some blood chemistry. And so we formulated a protocol to get her started. And after that, we will go into what the retesting looks like. All right, so again, our case study. She's a 48-year-old woman. She's had two children, both grown at this point. One was born via vaginal birth, and the other one was cesarean or C-section. And After her second childbirth, she was diagnosed with an umbilical hernia, which is quite common. It's more common than people think, especially after childbirth. And a couple years later, she did receive a polypropylene mesh implant. So this is a synthetic material that's intended to be permanent. Most people do receive this. It's the golden standard. So I would say about 80% of people are receiving this synthetic mesh as an implant for abdominal hernias of any type, including the epigastric region. So, along with that, she started developing a slew of symptoms, including heavy menses, the headaches, chronic and persistent headaches, anxiety, depression, constipation was something that she dealt with. So, the constipation would be even up to a week without having a bowel movement. And mood swings, of course, were there every day. She did have a history of kidney stones and recurrent UTI, so I wanted to keep all of that in mind. And pardon the NovaSure procedure in here twice. I was trying to get it in order. So she did have the Nova procedure for the heavy menses and then the continuance of those symptoms. When we look at her primary complaints, just kind of draw your eyes to the top. She had severe fatigue and low morning energy, so a lot of dragging in the mornings. And with that, she had the mood swings. Anytime any event happened, however minor it was in the mornings, that would kind of make her whole day into a pendulum that was hard to control. And she would have this irritability and these anxiety episodes throughout. With that, her sleep was often disturbed. She had a very difficult time winding down at night. She also woke often between the hours of 2 and 4 a.m., complaining about breast tenderness, bloating, and fluid retention. Now, keep in mind, she is 48. She's had this NovaSure procedure. There's no menses at this point. It's been several years since she had a menses. There's weight gain happening, history of kidney stones again. She's had the lithotripsy a few times to bust those up. She's noticed a sensitivity to caffeine, yet she's continuing to consume it to get through the day. And she has that incapacity to manage those stressful episodes. Again, they could be something small to set her off. And so we start with the metabolic chaos assessment, and this tells us really the system burden. And we look across the 7 functional systems, and especially looking in the ones that are highest ranking here. So you can see across the board, they're all relatively high, but we would like to focus on the ones that need a little bit more support. So you can see here the nervous system and the digestion and detoxification here, as well as hormones. So if we were to start with digestion at 85, to me, this is signifying that there's going to be some poor digestion, maybe enzyme output issues, bacterial imbalances. A lot of people use the term dysbiosis. That's just an imbalance of the microbial population in the gut. So that tells me that we need to do a lot of work in these areas. Altogether, the scores really kind of showed us a picture of systemic overload where there's heightened stress, inability to cope with stress, there's that sluggish detox, and the impaired digestion. So we're going to really hone in on those system burden scores. Moving forward to our testing now. So the first thing is metabolic typing. The other speakers may have spoken on this a little bit, but just to give you an overview, this was developed by William or Bill Wolcott, and it's really a personalized nutrition system that is based on the idea that people are going to metabolize foods differently depending on their biochemical individuality. So the core concept is that every person has a unique metabolic type, and that really shows how the body is going to be converting food into energy. So these differences will stem from genetics, they can be autonomic nervous system balance issues or cellular oxidative rates. All of those things will play a factor in what type of, well, what each person's metabolic type is. So the diet is going to aim to identify the optimal macronutrient ratio for each person, and macronutrients, the protein, carbohydrate, and in the mixed type, which I'll explain what those are. So as you can see, the fast oxidizers would be more sympathetic dominant, more go, go, go. They need higher amounts of protein and fat, lower carbs to keep going. And so the ideal meals would be things that are dense and savory. So think meats, eggs, avocado, things with high fat concentration, high protein concentration. Whereas a carbohydrate type is going to be slower. slower oxidizer, maybe parasympathetic dominant, and they're going to perform better on a higher carb or higher complex carb intake with lighter proteins and maybe minimal fat. And they'll feel better on things like fruits and vegetables and grains. But our client specifically was a fast oxidizer. And there's all additional factors in here that are considered, but for the sake of time, we're going to just focus in on the metabolic type that is this person. So this client was a fast oxidizer, and we're going to lean in on those proteins and fats for the diet. Continuing with our second test, which is a metabolic wellness profile. This one is a quick at-home test. It's a dried urine collection that's done at the beginning of the day, and it's really simple to collect. So I like it as one of the foundational labs. Not too much to consider, with the exception of wanting to ensure you're eating a normal meal the night before, including ample proteins. So with that, it does analyze 3 markers, and we'll go over them in just a moment. I'll show the lab results for this client. It shows indican, total bile acids, and it also has a marker for oxidative stress, and which is a beautiful snapshot of digestion and detoxification processes of the body. So we'd start with the indican, which is our protein absorption, or if we have a high indican value, that would show that protein is putrefying in the gut. There's some slow or stagnation in the gut, and dysbiosis is likely. The total bile acids would give a window on hepatic biliary function, so maybe some insights on bile flow and the ability to absorb or digest fats. And then the marker for the oxidative stress is called 8-hydroxy-2-deoxyguanosine, or 8-OHDG for short. We'll just use 8-OHDG from now on. And that is a validated marker for oxidative stress or DNA damage. So at our client, we look at her results and we see clear signs that the gut-liver axis, the gut-liver detox axis is really compromised. It needs support. And we saw that again from her metabolic chaos scorecard. The indican you can see here is in the green range, right? It is showing in green, and optimally you think green is great, especially that shade of green. But as an FDN, we have optimal ranges where we want to see this below 60, really in the first quintile here. So as we see, it's starting to trend out of there. And so it might be signifying that there's bacterial overgrowth, or maybe just poor digestion. We don't have the right microbes in there. So essentially proteins could be fermenting in the gut instead of breaking down efficiently. So that also will point to digestive enzyme and stomach acid outputs that are kind of compromised. With the total bile acids, you can see that greater than symbol there. So we know it's off the charts high. And really that's going to tell us that there's inefficient detoxification through the liver as well as the gallbladder. So when bile isn't flowing well, fat digestion suffers, toxins can be recirculating, which is absolutely what we don't want. Our bodies are already compromised, especially for those who have implants that they cannot remove. This particular client is not considering an explant at this time. I know that it is becoming more of a practice now. More of the hernia specialists are looking at different methods to do an explant appropriately and offer a bridge that will hold. However, it's not really necessary to have an explant for every single person when you can bring down the load. So going back to the client, again, we know that with this total bile acid being high, that total toxins are probably just recirculating, and we need to address that. Otherwise, the inflammatory load is going to continue to increase. And finally, the 8-OHDG, another one of those markers that we want in that first quintile. It's in the second, so we're trending high. Could be that there's measurable damage happening inside the cells, and that again is often from chronic inflammation, recirculating toxins, or mitochondrial strain in general systemically. So altogether, the pattern is really highlighting a stressed digestive system, again, sluggish detox, and oxidative damage. So let's move forward to our mucosal barrier assessment, which is our third test. With this one, just to again give you a quick overview, it is a dried blood spot that assesses gut permeability. You may have heard the term leaky gut thrown around quite often. And so this is a test that can measure that tight junction and histamine handling, which is beautiful because a lot of the clients that I've seen have this histamine overwhelm. They have all of these quote, allergy reactions to everything they're eating, everything they're exposed to, perfumes, fragrances, things like that. They have an overwhelming reaction and they're not really sure why. So I love this test because it can give us some insights into that piece. So again, it's a simple finger stick dried blood test that can be done. And when our clients are really with coming in with post-infectious symptoms, or they have a suspicion of leaky gut, it's really one to use. Always use it with anyone coming in, again, implant injured. So with this client, I'll briefly, just for a visual representation, we know that a healthy mucosal layer is going to allow for proper nutrient absorption and assimilation. But when we have this situation where there is degradation in that gut wall, we know that we're also going to get pathogens and other undigested food particles coming into our bloodstream. And that is another thing we need to try to minimize to make sure there is not an overactivation of those tight junctions. With her results, notice that it's pretty clear again. There's clear evidence that the gut lining is impaired. There's a histamine imbalance here and can really point to why she's having all of these symptoms. So her zonulin was at 10.3. It's indicating borderline intestinal permeability. So it's not a severe leaky gut, but it does show that those tight junctions of her lining are starting to loosen. And that typically happens when the inflammation and the stress hormone imbalances or microbial overgrowth is starting to irritate the gut wall. We'll talk more specifically about that in a bit. Next, her histamine at 2.42, which is quite elevated here again. It tells us there's an ongoing histamine response, likely from gut bacteria, again, having the bad guys too much in concentration versus a nice balance, and also can be from the mast cell activation that's occurring. So her diamine oxidase here, DAO enzyme, came in at 9.9, which is on the lower end of the optimal range. I just want to draw your attention to the scale. You may or may not be able to see it, but we have this in reverse order compared to what the others are. So it goes from high to low, left to right. So you can see hers is here at 9.9. And that means her ability really to break down the histamine inside the gut is also compromised. It's weakened, and it's going to make her more prone to food reactions, for instance, triggering symptoms like headache or even anxieties, especially post-meal. So it's really telling, but even more is this ratio, because we don't just look at individual markers, we look at the ratios. There always has to be a balance. And you can see the histamine to DAO ratio here is quite off. Another clear sign that histamine is accumulating far above the clearance capacity. So her body is in that state of overload, and there's that production of histamine that's happening way faster than it can degrade it. So we'll move to the stress and hormone panel, another one from Fluids IQ. And this one, again, at home, it can be done. Non-invasive salivary sample that you collect at 4 different times during the day. And it's really designed to help us learn about the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal function, so HPA axis for short. And it can let us know if the circadian rhythm is intact and how the sex and adrenal hormones interplay with mucosal immunity. And we would consider it again for all of the clients that come in with these symptoms that they've not received any formal diagnosis, but they know something is off, and they have this systemic like malaise, full body wide, anxiety, sleep issues, mood swings. So this is another pertinent lab for every client that comes that way. And again, love this. Some people go in for a blood serum. There are also urinary panels to assess metabolites, but this one is a salivary, looking at what is available in the body. So the first thing that it shows is the cortisol awakening response curve. And it's a good graphical representation to see where we should be in terms of optimal cortisol response curve. So that green line there is indicating how we should be developing or generating cortisol response. And we would see in a healthy rhythm that we peak in the morning, first thing, starting off, and then we have a steady decline going through the afternoon and evening as the body's going to transition towards rest. And that's what that green line means. Now, in contrast, if you look at this blue line here, not only is it really low here, it's pretty flat going forward. We have a very minor increase between morning and noon. And so that really shows us, again, a flat and suppressed pattern. Cortisol is remaining low. There's no normal surge to support alertness and focus in the morning, and the motivation can be lacking because of the sensation here. So by noon, again, little change. And then in the afternoon and night, she was tanked. So barely making it through the day. There was really nothing to get her through except for that noontime. She had a little bit of a pick me up, likely due to the caffeine drinks that she was ingesting. The pattern is consistent with fatigue, HPA axis fatigue, or burnout, which is a term that a lot of practitioners, and you probably hear it just generally, I'm burnt out. This client was truly burnt out. So it does manifest clinically as that low motivation, brain fog, and many people do develop the caffeine dependencies just to get through each day. The good news is that it can be reversed with a combination of sleep support. Glycemic control is major on here, and sometimes we like to use targeted adaptogens. One piece that is always used is the nervous system regulation work. So all of these together can be used to retrain that cortisol curve. Looking beyond the cortisol response, we also have hormone and immune profile that paints the picture of more adrenal underfunction that's paired here with immune and hormonal reactivity. So we start at the top with DHEA sulfated. So she's in a range, she's in a good range here. It shows that the adrenal reserves are not quite depleted, but the cortisol to DHEA ratio is pretty low at 1. And that again correlates with that flat HPA axis response, fitting in with her symptoms quite perfectly there. Her estradiol here is at the upper end of the range, and progesterone is very elevated here. So the progesterone to estrogen ratio in the third, you can see that it's also elevated. So progesterone, it's not a case of estrogen dominance at this point. We're seeing more of that progesterone being impactful, and that can be paradoxical. So on one hand, she might feel sedated and very heavy. And on the other hand, she might have that emotional volatility. So it's not a good place to be. We always want that balance. The other markers here, so if we look at the testosterone, slightly high at 54.1, and that can contribute to irritability, anxiety. It also paints a picture of maybe some insulin resistance, so we're going to want to take a look at that. But considering she's had a NovaSure procedure in the past for heavy menses, and then not really received a diagnosis, but it is kind of painting a picture of PCOS. So that's another indication, like when we have these androgens that are trending high, that might be something that could be contributing to the metabolic chaos. With melatonin, you can see down here, it is 1.4, so it's within the range. I consider that a non-clue. The secretory IgA, so that is elevated, about double what it should be. And that really describes someone in a high output, low reserve state. The body's inflamed, hormones are misaligned, and the adrenal rhythm is flat. So that clinical priority is now going to be for HPA axis support, calming the mucosal inflammation, and trying to rebalance those hormones, including nervous system regulation supports there. Moving forward. Again, the blood chemistry was done by her primary care manager. I don't have the entire panel here, but I did want to flag a couple things that stood out, significant things that can also be looked at in our Dress for Health method. So with that, triglycerides were elevated. The ratio triglyceride to HDL was significantly elevated at 6.1, again, pointing us towards maybe some insulin resistance and that sluggish liver there. It correlates with her symptoms just as well. And then the ferritin, TIBC, the iron panel was all pretty high, so indicative of iron overload or inflammatory storage pattern. Again, with the mesh implant, that is a fixed and chronic toxicant in the body. So the body is going to be continuously trying to encapsulate this or reject it, one or the other. Now, for people who've had long-standing mesh, this, once it's in place, there's not systemic infections, it can still have biofilms there. And biofilms will continuously reseed the gut and reseed surrounding areas with bad microbes. So you can think about, how do we get rid of that? And we'll talk about that. All right, vitamin D, just a couple more. Vitamin D was suboptimal. So we have reduction of serotonin support, the immune function and regulation, hormone regulation are impacted. And then that testosterone in the serum was also elevated. So already this is correlating with our salivary testing where the androgen dominance is there causing strain to the adrenal system. All right, so we'll get into our first protocol. And looking at the time, I'm probably going to speed through this so we get to the retests. All right, so her primary complaints, again, listed here. We had that fatigue and low morning energy, and you can read those. They're just a repeat of before. But our primary goals, considering the labs that we just looked at, were to normalize that HPA axis. We also want to lower elevated androgens, specifically looking at DHEAS and testosterone. Those elevations do reflect adrenal overdrive or impaired hormone clearance. So that's a picture that we didn't quite get in the numeric value, but we can infer based on what we know about the client's symptoms and what was shown in the labs that we did run. So by balancing our cortisol and improving detox pathways, we can often bring these hormones back into range naturally. So that's where we'll be focusing with all of our protocol. For diet, the main consideration, it will always be to maintain blood sugar stability, but we also want to remove these endocrine stressors. So thinking alcohol, limit the amount of alcohol. If you can eliminate it altogether, even better. Caffeine, we want to keep it under 1 cup a day. We want to reduce processed foods. We want to reduce, in her case, high oxalate greens and other foods. So she was consuming some of the spinach, almonds, and beets. Beets were in one of the super green drinks that she was eating. And so that could have been exacerbating her issues with the urinary tract, the frequent UTIs, and the just oxalate intolerance in general that can be systemic as well. So we focus on eating organically grown or pasture raised whenever possible. For her, we eliminated gluten and replaced cow dairy for about 8 weeks with goat or sheep dairy and coconut yogurt to get her probiotics still in there. And the macronutrient starting point that we saw from the metabolic typing diet would be 40, 30, 30. That's protein, carbs, and fat. Adjusting those as needed. She did have a glucometer that she was using, and then the recommendation is for a CGM so that she doesn't have to continuously prick her finger. With rest, and hydration. Hydration is super big. That can assist with having daily bowel movements. Oftentimes, we know that people are quite dehydrated. They're not drinking near enough water, or the water they're drinking is of poor quality and actually building toxins rather than helping filter and push these things out of the body. So that was another piece, like making sure to have a steel water canister to be able to fill it up with filtered clean water and make sure to drink at least 2.5 liters daily. For the sleep and circadian reset, we have that sleep window at 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. is the ideal time, with lights and screens off after dinner. She did use blue light blockers, but her goal was to have everything shut off. And I think she actually moved her bedtime to 9 p.m. for a while, so actually better than what I had suggested. The bedtime snack was for the controlling of those the hypoglycemic events that could be happening at night. And so we had her pair a small amount of protein with a small amount of fat at night before bed, always ensuring to protect those 2 hours before midnight so that she can have ample restorative sleep so that she can move on to the next phase of her healing journey. With the exercise and stress reduction here. So for exercise, she was heavy lifting, kind of CrossFit training, a relationship she was in at the time. The male was a bodybuilder, so he really pushed that intensity, that type of workout on her. So we want her to prioritize low to moderate intensity on most days, avoid overtraining, but continue lifting for that, all of the benefits it has, including bone strength. Also to increase cardio reserve, build that lean muscle rather than bulk, and then maintain mobility and flexibility. So here again, sometimes when we have had abdominal surgeries, that mobility and flexibility is compromised. So we really need to work in methods that aren't going to cause more pain or cause tearing of adhesions that are meant to support the abdominal wall. And we really need to work sometimes with a specialist, like a therapist, a physical therapist, to help guide a person to learn where their limits should be placed, but also allow the body to increase the function overall. And then we want to support detox through movement, sweating with exercise. She's doing very well. And then she takes sauna, infrared sauna as tolerated. All right, so we move to stress reduction and the nervous system care. First and foremost is always to remove and limit toxic products. People too, if we're able to. Sometimes the relationship stress is really the most compromising thing around us, and we have to try to set firm boundaries there. But if we're looking at toxic products, there's a couple of sites and an app that I like. I like the Environmental Working Group Skin Deep for this. So really, it's not about throwing everything out and starting fresh, but it's about replacing items as they get used, and you're ready to throw them out, and replace them with a cleaner option that you can find from either EWG or the Yucca app. And there's a couple other apps that are really good, but always work to eliminate things, especially if they have a lot of ingredients that you can't pronounce. And if they say something like perfume or fragrance, anything like that, you want to get rid of them because they are endocrine disruptors. With the additional pieces, there's daily breath work and gratitude, meditation, and brief nature walks, but she was pretty good with this. She lives in a pretty rural area, so she was able to take nature walks on a daily basis for some time. And then the neural plasticity work, two of my favorites are emotional freedom technique, which can be done at any location. And then there's the brain tap, which offers binaural beats. It also has that biophoto modulatory therapy too. So a fancy way of saying these light therapy goggles that you can place on. I love this for people who have a hard time shutting down the brain. So with the ruminating thoughts, and they don't have the ability to do guided meditation so well, this is a physical obstruction to prevent you from scrolling through a phone or looking at something else that will take away from that peace time. So we did that. And then, of course, using the functional labs to identify all those hidden stressors. So with supplements, which is the last step of the approach, we again wanted to work on digestive health. So we chose better bitters here. Sometimes it's a cost scenario. You want to make sure you get the best of both worlds, the support that the client needs, and then try to keep it at a budget conscious way. So better bitters here is a good option to take before meals. And then the oxy powder is we use that to try to kind of provoke digestion to take place. And then we switch that over to magnesium citrate for maintenance. For the gut barrier and the mucosal repair, I like Mega Mucosa, 1 scoop a day. You can add this to smoothies. And what it really is just a series of amino acids. So it has like L-proline and L-serine, cysteine, threonine. And they're all, again, key amino acids that are fundamental for rebuilding the intestinal mucosa. And it does include some polyphenols as well, which will help support that gut barrier. And one thing that it has dairy-free immunoglobulins, so it will support the immune system, and all of these things in one go. For the histamine and diamine oxidase support, I like Seeking Health, 1 capsule with high histamine foods, so not really necessary for every meal, just kind of as needed. And then always pair it with the food hygiene. So digestive health depends on how you prepare your foods as well. For anyone with high histamine, and she did have that, as well as the imbalance with the diamine oxidase formulation or production. So we wanted to minimize the aged processed foods. That includes processed meats and cheeses. Also cut the alcohol out completely at this point, and then freeze any leftovers promptly after preparing the foods. So all of those things together were to start supporting digestion properly. For the liver and bile flow, we have here some milk thistle, another simple tincture to take between meals. Studies have shown that the primary extract here really work to ease inflammation, and they can promote that cellular repair that's needed. We also used castor oil packs for her 3 to 5 times a week. Sometimes it can be messy and cumbersome, so we just want to make sure to get microcirculation through the pelvic cavity. And then finally, the calcium D-glucarate, 2 capsules a day. That is there to help estrogen metabolism and to really lower that androgen dominance. So that's what we did initially for these first sets of labs with the cortisol response. So I like to make sure the drainage pathways are opened, as you probably have heard other practitioners. So we do that, and we can also bring in adrenal support directly here as we're tapering down some of those stimulants. So here I like the daytime HPA Gaia formula, and the purpose again is to stabilize that rhythm, and it does help with reduction of that stress overload. And for oxidative stress and mitochondrial support, these are the go-tos that I like. So it's essentially a combination of CoQ10, NAC, and omega. It's like a good quality omega. And I like the Zinzino brand personally because they have rigorous testing there. So we did consider adding in things like green tea extract or spearmint to especially help with that hormone clearance, but considering her history with oxalate overload and with those urinary tract infections and kidney stones, we kind of erred on the side of caution and stayed away from those type of herbs. So early improvements that we saw included across the board. This is just 2 months into work, and across the board, you can see that every system has decreased. And this was enough motivation for her to keep going in the same protocol. And she did pursue additional nervous system supports and that additional therapy to keep going in her journey. When we look at the early symptom improvements, we saw that energy and mood had improved significantly. She was having fewer afternoon crashes, not really needing those stimulants, the coffee and the other energy drinks that she had been drinking. Her anxiety spikes, which were one of the main things, had decreased a lot. Her sleep quality was improved with fewer AM wake-ups, like the early morning wake-ups. Digestion, her motility was more regular. She was having daily bowel movements at this point. Headache intensity had dropped significantly, and she wasn't having those histamine symptoms, which she didn't even realize were connected to food hygiene and the types of food she was consuming prior. All right, but what happened was we had a decline a year later, and that was really attributed to the following things. So over time, sometimes we get comfortable with where we're at and we start taking on more again because we think we're fully healed, and jumping too much and releasing those boundaries that we had set that brought us into a better connection, better location in terms of our function can really be detrimental to us. We need to retain those boundaries. So she began to see the subtle signs after a few months. And so that's when she reapproached me and we began again. So looking again to start with the metabolic chaos scorecard. I'm not sure if you can see this very well, but it is a chart that shows where she was in the beginning. So this central part in gray is where she was in the beginning. This bluish color is where she was after those 2 months of working. And then a year and a half, nearly a year and a half later, when we redid the metabolic form, she was way out here on all of the systems. So we knew we had a lot of work to do, continuing with the nervous system regulation, continuing again with digestion and detoxification. So she knew that she had success initially, and this is what she had to do again to commit to making changes. So the retests, you already know what tests we ran. So again, the metabolic wellness, the MBA, the stress and hormone, we'll look at them again. Indican here is in the first quintile, which initially you'd be like, great, that means that she is properly digesting protein. But on speaking with her, and why it's so important to make that clinical correlation, her protein intake had dropped significantly. She had been relying on processed foods. So think those, I think they're Jimmy Dean breakfast sandwiches, a lot of carbs, less quality protein, things like that. So that is really what this marker is showing us. And when we see that, especially knowing her metabolic typing, that much of a drift, we need to come back in and really drill down that diet. So the bile acids here, on the contrast from the first test, are really low. They're at 5.87, and before they were on the opposite end of the spectrum. And that means that the bile flow has slowed dramatically, really reducing the ability to digest fats and clear old hormones. And so that liver congestion and stagnation can lead to inflammation and hormone imbalance and fatigue again. The biggest red flag here is the 8-OHDG again. So now elevated above 14.8. Clear sign of oxidative DNA stress and clear sign of mitochondrial strain. So we need to go back and take all of those supports, redo again the diet, make sure our boundaries are set, do the nervous system work. All those pieces are quite important to bring back in. When we compare the MBA here to the initial, we look at the zonulin. And so that is still quite high at 11.5, which means that that tight junction permeability, the intestinal barrier hasn't been fully sealed. And so that is often sustained by stress or lingering dysbiosis or inflammatory triggers. And when I see this, I know that we have to take a closer look at the gut microbiome, and the GI map is now foundational, has to be used. And so what we do see is the histamine here in a good range. So that's a little bit encouraging. And when I asked her, that's one thing that she did keep up, the hygiene, the food hygiene. So if she was preparing meals, she would make sure to freeze them. And that was more of her dinner routine. So morning and lunch kind of deviated from the home cooked meals, but at least she kept some of this and made sure to try to bring histamine high level foods down. She's no longer having as many histamine flares as she was when we first started to work. Now, the diamine oxidase is still suboptimal here at the borderline range. So not quite deficient, we would say, but it does suggest that the capacity to break down the histamine is still limited. All right, the stress and hormone retest. So this one took a little longer to retest, but it gave us time to work on the sleep hygiene again, making sure she was leaving that 2-hour block before bedtime, keeping that as a ceremonial time for her to get into a parasympathetic state. So that's one thing that is indicated here in the light blue. This is now where she's at with the cortisol awakening response curve. So you can see there's a substantial improvement. And with that, we know that the HPA axis is not flat and blunted anymore. So what we do with this is just kind of optimize, still work towards improving that morning cortisol ratio and making sure we have that nice taper into the night. So not too bad for the circadian rhythm shown here. For the additional hormones shown here, you can see substantial differences in all the sex hormones, the androgens. So DHEAS jumped from 2.6 to 10.6. Well above the preferred range, and that tells us that the adrenal androgen output is overactivated. Cortisol to DHEA ratio is now even less because of that, so it's at 0.5. That's kind of like an inverted ratio. We don't want that. That's going to also have us feeling that wired but tired sensation. With that, and it can also provoke anxiety throughout the day. On the sex steroid side, so you'll see both progesterone and estrogen quite high. And despite being high, the ratio has dropped. So progesterone to estrogen ratio shown here now is below where we would want. And so we are trending towards estrogen dominance, even though we have substantial of both hormones. So this can really create symptoms, again, of fluid retention, bloating, headaches, and those mood swings, especially if the liver bile clearance is sluggish, which we've already seen. And then most notably is the testosterone climbing from 54 to 208. So definitely thinking unaddressed condition. We can't diagnose or treat specific conditions, but we know that that is a factor that's underlying here. With melatonin, we are in a good range, so the daytime suppression is intact. The concerning change now, instead of the SIG-A being at the high end, like double what our range is, now it is substantially low. So we're seeing more of a crash in mucosal immunity at this point, possibly from that persistent battle that it's been facing for so long. So the bottom line here in the retest is that it shows high androgens, DHEA, estrogens, progesterone, everything, all is high. And our morning cortisol is still a little low, so we need to work on that as well as restoring immune function. All right, I will go past this slide here just so we can get to the GI map. So before we get into it, again, another home lab. You've seen it already, so we'll just kind of reiterate that it is a stool collection. Typically takes 2 to 3 weeks to get results, and it will evaluate more than just the population, like the beneficial bacteria, but also provide additional insights through intestinal health markers. On the first page of her results, looking pretty good. So in the pathogen screen, bacterial, parasitic, and viral pathogens are not shown. So that's a very good news here. On the next page, we have Helicobacter pylori, or H. pylori for short. You can see that it was detected 1 order of magnitude less than the reference range. So when I see this, it does mean that it's present at a low subclinical level, but it's important to note that there are no virulence factors shown here. So if we had those, it would indicate more of an aggressive strain, but with their absence, it's considered more of a non-pathogenic colonization rather than an active infection. So we're not going to actively work to manage that situation. Our focus is going to be more on optimizing the gastric environment. As you can see, we're coming down to commensals here. And with the commensals or the keystone, these are the bacteria that we want in a good range, not overgrown, not underpopulated, but we see for her, there is global depletion of all the beneficial species. There's not one in here that I would consider optimal. So, and then not to mention this bacteroides and the Firmicutes down here, which are the bacterial phyla, those are the family. 90% of the gut should be comprised of these phyla. So when I see those, it is definitely a global depletion. But what stands out here, and I see it frequently in implant injured clients, is that there's a pattern of Akkermansia trending low, Faecalibacterium prausnitzii, and Roseburia very, very low. And so those are the keystone organisms that maintain mucosal barrier health. They modulate inflammation. They produce short chain fatty acids like butyrate. And so when this
Hey guys, it's Ev here. Just wanted to tune in really quick. I know some of you got in a little bit later. At the half-hour mark, so 33 minutes from now, this exact same stream, you do not need to hop off, but it will turn into our live course tour. Our COO, Chief Operations Officer, Brandy Buscow, will be tuning in with us, so stay tuned for that. One question that I did want to answer live, just because I think it's a great one here. Would there be references on which good supplement brands to choose or access? So as an FDN, you will be able to get like wholesale pricing with pretty much any supplement brand that you could possibly list off or imagine, which is great. And we go back and forth with this because we're not supplement loyal, just like we're not lab loyal. So what that means is things change. We don't want to be, tied in or have some deal with just one supplement brand or just one lab. That's not how we operate. At the same time, if we never taught you anything about supplements in the course, people would be upset. So we do both things. We do the teach a man to fish and give him fish. We give you fish in the sense of showing you which supplements would make a lot of sense in the beginning of your practitioner journey, but we also teach you how to fish in the sense of showing you how to decipher when is a supplement actually high quality, when would it make sense for this protocol so that you never need to be loyal to one brand or anything like that. So just wanted to give you guys that quick update and then answer to that question, and we will keep going with Sharon here.
And so when these species are depleted, we see there's persistent mucosal inflammation. And for my abdominal mesh clients, we already have inflammation in the gut. We've already had surgical trauma and adhesions forming. So we do not want to have anything else that's going to cause inflammation. And then the gut permeability piece, of course. So both the dominant phyla are really low, suppressed. We want to work to rebuild all of this. With the opportunistic growth, you can see there's some that are in black font, some that are red indicated here by high. And when we see that, we want to look at the species and really see, well, where can they be coming from? How are they being more comfortable in that environment? So with that, the species, again, that we see here, Morganella, Pseudomonas, both of them Pseudomonas. And so these are opportunistic gram-negative bacteria that they tend to flourish when the gut barrier is compromised. So if you have that leaky gut, they're probably present there sometimes in these high ranges. What I see with Morganella specifically is that they are associated with biofilm formation. So again, if there's recurrent infections, systemic issues, inflammation, and that general feeling of malaise, no matter what you do, consider that bacterial population there is increasing that biofilm, and they're also increasing the inflammation because of it. So when there's not an explant that can be done, you want to think about clearing up the environment. So thinking pod coffee makers, like those things are they harbor all of these types of bacteria. Water filtration systems. So people have water filtration, they think it's great. They're not maintaining it as often as they need to. So I always say double up on the maintenance on that. And then soda dispensers. So if you're going out and eating and drinking at restaurants or going out to bars, think about those taps. They're not very well cleaned. And in my younger life, I did work at different facilities, and I remember just how disgusting they were with biofilms. So those things are being ingested. Let's go forward here. There was nothing else indicated in the rest. The viruses and parasites for her came out undetectable. So we will go forward to the intestinal health markers. So this is the section I really love about the GI map. It doesn't just tell us about pathogens, but it gives us a deeper look into the function of the intestinal environment. So we'll start with steatocrit really here, below detectable limit. So that's telling us she's not really losing fat in the stool, undigested fat in the stool, but the elastase is low. And you've heard it from other speakers. Optimally, we want this at 500. So even though the lab range is 200, we do see this is quite suboptimal, and that could be contributing to her symptoms substantially. We won't talk much about beta-glucuronidase other than the fact that that could be indicative of reabsorption of certain toxins, but hers is in a good range. Occult blood is not shown, so we're happy with that. There's no blood. You can think about hemorrhoids and fissures and things like that. That could be the culprit, but also if shown, then we would probably want to have other eyes look at it. And here the secretory IgA, once again, super high. So we had high Sig-A in the oral mucosa, and then we had that dropping down as if exhaustive state has fallen, but now there's a localized inflammatory response in the gut. So that is something that really needs to be addressed. I know we're running short here, so let's run through a quick protocol.
You're all good, Sharon. By the way, they're loving this. You're all good. Don't worry at all.
Thank you. So the dietary changes, they still were mimicking the initial protocol. We wanted to ditch the stimulants. One of the drinks that she had, I think it was called Ghost, but it has artificial sweeteners and of course, excessive caffeine. So she tapered off of that. She swapped it out for mushroom coffee. I like everyday dose here. Also for half calf. So she would do a Swiss processed decaf and then taper down there. Hydration smart, so making sure to use filtered water with appropriate electrolyte balancing mixes when possible. And then the swapping of snacks. So as she had left or kind of migrated away from the initial protocol, her snacks became things like goldfish and candy with nuts. And so we swapped those out with things like boiled eggs and clean jerky, things like that. And then protein shakes as needed. I do like Equip protein shake as protein mix as a good option. Maybe pair it with some coconut milk and blueberries, and then you have your antioxidants there. Adding soluble fiber, really important for digestive health. So we had her add ground flax and chia daily, 1 to 2 teaspoons which also helped the hormone clearance. And for the macronutrients, so we made some adjustments as her carbs had increased. We came back to the essential metabolic type that she should be following, that 40-30-30. All right, we developed a specific food list for her, particularly because of the oxalate intolerance. So I wanted to make sure she had plenty of options. I know it's very small, but these are individually made for clients. And then rest, very similar. That was something she maintained with the exception of protecting that 2 hours before. She's still getting that morning light. So we saw that she had that circadian rhythm shift and it was maintaining, it was holding. And so we kept all of that in as foundational. With exercise, everything again, keep moderate intensity, especially with that high oxidative stress. And, doing the post-meal walks to help with blood sugar regulation. So lower intensity exercise post meals. Avoid high intensity. We've already talked about that. We didn't want to suppress the HPA axis again as it was in the beginning. And then this is the additional piece, like pairing breathing techniques, 4-6 breathing cadence during and after activity. And that would help kind of tone down that hyperdrive, that sympathetic response. We can keep a more balanced response while working out. With stress, making sure that we keep those micro breaks, keep those boundaries. At this point, there was a relationship that she had had to kind of let go so that she could focus in on her own emotional well-being without making those connections and trying to push through these things. You need to really, again, remove that type of toxin again. So she went back to gratitude journaling right before bed to help with the sleep. And last is the supplementation. So supplements we brought in are the calcium D-glucarate with DIM, so diindolyl methane. These are derived from cruciferous vegetables, so a lot of people can digest these okay, broccoli, cauliflower, things like that. But sometimes we also need a supplement that's going to be more heavy hitting. So all of these things are included, and they have other benefits like they can help prevent cancer risk, so breast, prostate, cervical cancer, all these things. It's been shown in the study. Also supports weight loss and maintaining healthy testosterone levels. Brought back in the mitochondrial supports, which she still had. For the electrolyte mix, I do like Jigsaw. I also like Element, but we opted for this one. Quickly, she could take it with her to work and just add it to her shaker cup. And Mega Mucosa was kept in, this time for a longer period of time to ensure that we're sealing that gut lining. Digestive enzymes, very important to help her assimilate all of the nutrients that she's consuming. So as she's rebuilding the liner, now she's going to be able to properly absorb the food. All right, we kept in the better bitters. It's not showing here, but the magnesium citrate was now changed to magnesium glycinate. So her bowel movements were much better, but we wanted to include the glycinate form for more of the relaxation support at nighttime. And then for our phase 2, this would be more of the androgen balancing. And we did this as we continue to taper off the stimulants. So we lower androgens, we stabilize, even thyroid, which I didn't mention, but in our initial labs, everything looked fine. Just a little bit slight underconversion of free T4 to free T3. But so we just want to support that on the outset. So with that, the testo quench again to support androgen dominance. It includes the ingredients salmeto and chaste tree. Chaste tree is also beneficial for progesterone and myoinositol. So always considering that blood sugar stability, but this one is a heavy hitter too because it can address the androgen dominance. And just the last phase of our protocol here, just to address the GI map. So you'll notice this is the last phase because we need to give the body adrenal reserve to be able to eradicate, or in this case, just kind of target that rebalancing of the gut microbiome. So we started with biocidin, which is also a biofilm buster. Love it, absolutely. We'll use it in most cases, especially when implants are a concern, but also pairing it with a binder, an appropriate binder like GI Detox. Cellcore also has an amazing binder. We continue to replace the digestive support enzymes, had that in there long term. And once we finish with the biofilm breakdown, we want to reseed with a spore-based probiotic. So I like Proflora 4R for this. It will support the keystone bacteria that we were missing, along with that high fiber diet for those other butyrate producing. So we also support with exactly that. So sodium butyrate, it's been shown in studies, numerous studies, to enhance mucosal healing, that tight junction integrity, but also very instrumental for preoperative procedures. It's been shown in the studies to help prevent adhesions and to also support the recovery in terms of the amount of time it takes to recover postoperatively. Really love this, especially if someone is going through an explant surgery in the future, but altogether beautiful supplement to use. Okay, and the last piece is just, you can do this dietarily, so rotate your plant-based prebiotics. You can see here a few options. If you're not able to get those greens in a clean way, like organic, then you can use a supplement, prebiotic fiber, continue with hydration, and then that adrenal rhythm support. So keep the Gaia. We kept the Gaia for her in the daytime. And if she needed a little assistance for nighttime, that NeuroCalm PM is there. So the Gaia has several, I think it had 5 adaptogenic herbs, so rhodiola and ashwagandha, things like that. And the NeuroCalm would be more of GABA containing and 5-HTP and those kind of neurotransmitter supporting herbs. Right, so the lab reassessment will be done 6 months after she completes the phase. the last phase. And we will be going through the metabolic chaos questionnaire again. We want to make sure that we are hitting all of those systems, improving everywhere, and it will also redirect us to which systems might need a little bit more support. So we'll be using another GI map, the stress and hormone panel, likely to also include the metabolization pathway, so maybe an additional urinary evaluation there. And then overall, so far in the short time that she's re-implemented this protocol 2, she's noted improved resilience under the daily stress, being able to go through her day and actually smile again. Before, she would fake the smiles, and she always felt like she was just faking her personality, but now she is able to smile and really just be present. So that mood stability is there, better concentration at work, healthier relationships around. She's able to enjoy being in social settings. And then she's had fewer sugar cravings, which is very good as we continue to work on that glycemic control. So I will finish here. I know it was a whirlwind of information, but I just want to thank everyone for listening, and I'm open to any questions.
All right, let me get my mouse switched back over to this setup. I keep like switching it from one to the other. Sharon, thank you so much. This is a really cool one again, because like our first one today, it's just something that personally, at least, I don't get to hear about that often. So I think this is kind of enlightening for people. So for those of you that put a 1 in the chat when we first started, you had never heard about something like this, do you feel like you have a better understanding now, or could you help guide some family members or friends that might be dealing with this, maybe you didn't know before, in the right direction? So let's see what we got in the chat. All right, well, Kat and Dina are feeling good about it. That's great. But let us know if anyone else. Okay, there we go. Nice. Awesome, guys. We have plenty of questions to get to. Thank you for doing the Q&A thing with me. Unfortunately, again, we're not going to be able to get to all of them, so I will buff as many out as we can with Sharon. And Sharon, if you don't mind, we'll do what we did with Alyssa as well. Let's just leave your share screen on right now so that people that are catching up can scan your QR code or check out your links. I am still working on that sheet for you all so that you have all of these speakers from this week's handles on Instagram or social media, as well as what they specialize in, so that you can shout this out with your groups. Sharon, before your session, they volunteered this. They were super nice. They actually wanted to get everyone's handles from the speakers so that they could share this on their own personal Facebook and Instagram, so that their family members and friends, if they were dealing with any of these issues, would know which speaker to go to. So I thought that was really cool of them. All right, let's get to some questions here. And remember, on this same exact Zoom webinar, we are going to have one more case study today in 23 minutes. That is with Jen Maleka. There is no one's butt I kiss more than Jen's, and that is because she brought me into FDN. She worked with my mom. She literally saved her life. So I'll spare the full introduction for her now, or until then, rather. But please stick around for that one. It's going to be great. She's been doing this longer than me, so she's going to have a great case study for you guys. All right, let's go. And keep in mind, Sharon, some of these are going to be from, it might be from even 30, 40 minutes ago, just because we're going in order. All right, can you identify your metabolic type by knowing your blood type? The question is based off the book, Eat Right for Your Blood Type. Bridget's not sure how accurate that is.
Yeah, so there are different forms of identifying, and definitely the metabolic typing diet I use is based on a questionnaire. So really knowing your body, how it puts on weight, how it holds weight, things like that, it could be very bio-individual. Blood type diet is different. There's different methodologies, and then there's also the genetic testing component of things. So all three, and HTMA is another one. So it's just different, looking at things differently. And what I like about the metabolic typing diet is that you can see if you can quickly see, and there's a questionnaire that I use right after, like to make sure people are consuming the right macronutrient ratios. That this really can be tracked in terms of how much or how closely you are hitting those macronutrients and how are you feeling after. So I really like this version of it because it's a way to assess directly how are these macronutrient ratios affecting each person, whether it be energy, resilience, or digestive health, symptom reduction, things like that.
All right. Could you please talk about the good? This is actually how the question's worded. The good, bad, and the ugly involved with NovaSure. Any knowledge of this, and for which persons it may be worth nudging them to do?
Yes, so that would be outside of my scope. NovaSure for this particular client and for several was used as a gold standard. So my client wasn't given all of the information. They kind of trusted the practitioner's guidance and just went forward without really informed consent in that area. So I always advocate for a person to think about the procedure they're getting, even with something like a cancer diagnosis. Think about the procedure, do your research, and do the benefit risk assessment for your individual case, and work with your practitioner to figure out your best course of action.
Okay. Just wanted to, this is a comment, but I just wanted to say this because a few people have agreed. Guys, we're going to make more stuff for you like this now because of the response we've gotten this week. So Michael even said, I can't speak for others, but this case studies format, especially on sub niches like this, is awesome relative to other formats. Feels very practical seeing the timeline. So, and Michael and Justin, can you guys please let me know in the chat? And I'm sure other people agree with you. I'm just going to you because you said something. Have you been on other events that we've done? Like, we're not going to take offense. We always just want to improve. So what other events have you been on that we've done? And which ones, like, which other ones have you been on? Just let me know and I'll check that out later. Thank you. All right, well, you did list this. You listed all the companies that you order the lab tests from at some point in the presentation, so that's fine. You did a great, actually, you were one of the best, in my opinion, at explaining the different labs and the before and after. So thank you for that, Sharon. Let's go here. When you say low to moderate intensity, could you quantify that a bit, please?
Okay, another thing that is very bio-individual, but essentially what I say, if you're doing any type of exercise and completely out of breath and can't carry on a conversation with someone next to you, then that intensity is probably too high, especially considering the cortisol or the HPA axis that was shown in her stress and hormone profile. So on the other side, if you have adequate reserves throughout your day and you've been pushing hard, then that's where you would say, I don't really need to modify the intensity. I'm good right where I'm at. So just kind of make sure you can go on with daily function and not have that post-exertional malaise afterwards too. That's a big one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michaela. So she said the tests were listed, but I didn't see the names of the lab companies itself. So what were the lab companies that were involved in the tests
Yeah,
today, Sharon?
yeah. So Fluids IQ did the mucosal barrier, the metabolic wellness, and the stress and hormone, and then the GI map from Precision Analytical.
And thank you to our sponsors, which include Fluids IQ, Avexia, and Oxford Biomedical Labs for making this awesome event happen and helping us with this format. So huge shout out to Fluids IQ. Okay, are there certain types of physical therapy subspecialties or certifications that are more knowledgeable on how to work with mesh in herniated areas? Great question.
That is a great question. And from my own journey, I went to just a traditional physical therapist, and that invoked so much inflammation and so much pain. Another reason why I kind of gave up after like the first several months. When you're in this kind of condition, you don't want to exacerbate the problem. You want to restore mobility. So I would say you really have to work with, and I think that cranial sacral therapists are huge. They're very informed by how to do therapy with a person that has hypersensitivity, we'll say, but also functional neurologists will oftentimes have therapists in their office that will work with a client that has more specific and hypersensitivity, like I just mentioned.
Gosh, you guys are making me spend so much time in the chat because you're saying such good stuff. So Sharon, I wanted you to see this. Diana actually just said, agreed. Sharon's presentation, hands down, had the best visual comparisons and did a great job taking us through the journey. It's really nice seeing such a diverse group of case studies. Awesome. And guys, again, this isn't a competition, so we all want to learn, including our presenters. Our presenters are very nice people. If you agree with what Diana just said and you would like to have seen more presenters do the visual in the way that Sharon did, drop a 1 in the chat because then we can help coach them through that next time and use hers as an example. So thanks, Sharon, for what you've done. Wow. Okay. Keep coming. Cool, cool. All right, we'll keep doing questions, but please keep dropping the 1 in the chat if you guys agree with that. All right, Ginger, when eating coconut yogurt, do the probiotics actually reach the small and large, oops, my TV was going to go off, small and large intestines, or do they get killed off in the stomach acid?
All right, that is a very good question. In terms of probiotic retention, that you would have to really assess on the person's GI map. And the HCl, the hydrochloric acid in everybody's gut is different. We know we want more acidic conditions to begin with, but you really need to assess what is beneficial for each person. So that's another benefit of doing a pre and post protocol to see if they're getting ample probiotics to receive the gut. So sometimes the food is not going to cut it, and that's when we do like a spore-based probiotic to help with that.
All right. Does infrared sauna liberate any of the chemical elements of the mesh into the gut or bloodstream, how can we avoid that dump? I guess assuming that that would be true if you believe it's true.
Yeah. I've been actually doing a deep dive recently. I've interviewed a couple of specialists, or we'll say producers of these type of technologies. And the interesting thing is that the change in thermal temperature is minimal to a certain depth. So if we're thinking like just in the visceral area, you know how we have toxins stored in the fat. Yes, we are excreting those fats doing infrared sauna. I'm sorry, the toxins, but it's not. There's the depth is not enough. There's only like a 1 degree Fahrenheit differential if you're in the depth, like at the organs. So it's really not anticipated to cause faster degradation. However, I do still caution people to start low and slow. We keep it at, I think a maximum of 130 would be a safe bet, and doing about 30-minute sessions.
And just for our international folks, obviously you meant 130 degrees Fahrenheit is what you were
Yes,
just
that's
saying, right?
correct.
Infrared sauna. Got it. We'll have some people cook in Celsius there. So that's a really good point too. Yeah, I never even thought about that. It can only get so hot internally, otherwise we would no longer be here. So yes, that temperature rise internally is going to be a lot less. Okay. Oh, could you list the favorite apps that you have for identifying toxics again, please?
Yeah, so Environmental Working Group, they have an app, I think is Skin Deep is the one for personal care products. You can also go on their website. They have a tap water database, which I use all the time to determine if filtration is adequate. And then a Yucca app is on the phone where you can actually just go and scan things as you're picking them up from the store.
I'm sorry to follow up with that. Yuka app, how do I spell that?
Yuka.
Okay, Yuka app. There you guys go. I put that in the chat for you. All right. Dina, for muscle growth, do you use EAAs, which for those that don't know are essential amino acids? So it's kind of all of them as opposed to the traditional bodybuilder branch chain amino acids thing. So do you ever use that?
I would defer that to somebody who works with more of that muscle sustaining, muscle growth. I don't really focus on that, but yes, amino acids we do include in protocols. And you saw one of our blends that we included does have all of the foundationals. Always eating nutrition, dietary amino acids are it's like the focus, making sure you're consuming. And I don't want to say it this way, but when you're vegetarian, it's hard to get the amino acid profile that is needed to sustain and to prevent cachexia.
Sure. Bridget, again, why magnesium citrate as opposed to the other forms?
Magnesium citrate is optimal to help for with bowel movement. So the oxide is not readily absorbed, but it can help stimulate a bowel movement much quicker. So citrate is something you can do long term. It's not as aggravating to the gut, but it does help stimulate bowel movements while having a form of magnesium that is bioavailable.
All right. Um, Ginger again, regarding mucosal support, powder versus capsules, is it just personal preference or is powder a different formula?
No, they're the same formula. They probably have, the microcellulose in the capsule. So some people do prefer minimizing that versus other people who will actually go and buy gelatin capsules and use the powder within the capsules to be able to get it down. However,
Hmm. Okay. Is there any concern with abdominal meshes near the liver to use castor oil plus heat, for example?
the heat would I would recommend not having it substantial heat, especially an abdominal wall. With adhesions, you probably can't feel the heat as much as other areas. So test it on a more sensitive part of your body, like your wrist, before you apply the heat. So again, we want to keep a moderate heat for pain if you're trying to use it for pain management, but not so high. It would not impact again to a depth that we're thinking, but who knows? Maybe with more research, we're going to see that there's more of that degradation of fibers. It could happen. We need to know the research a little more.
We have some great practitioners or soon-to-be practitioners here. Really well thought out questions, guys. Whoever works with you is going to be lucky. I'm glad that you guys are thinking about these things. All right, next, I heard that milk thistle, quote unquote, protects the liver, so you supposedly aren't supposed to take it with other liver support products. Do you believe that that's true?
I don't because we have several supplements that use a combination of different things, and so it does work in synergy depending on the herbs. And it's really a practitioner or whoever is going to use it can look up the ingredients to whatever product they're using to make sure, but they do work synergistically together.
I'm in complete agreement with that. I actually hadn't heard that. So good question, Bridget. All right. Do, 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 do. What What symptoms and conditions tend to develop with meshes? Does it matter where the mesh is located in the body and how deep and stuff like that? So, are there any trends that tend to occur because of people with these mesh implants?
Yes, and that's a great question because it's not just mesh, it's any type of implant. You've had a
Sure.
couple speakers that talked about breast, dental implants, they can have joint repairs. So all of them can provoke a similar response. It depends on that person's genetic capacity um, to modulate that inflammation. So when it's perpetual inflammation is when we have the problem. And there's a term that's Asia, it's known as Asia syndrome, which is autoimmune, autoinflammatory syndrome induced by adjuvants. Also can be acquired from vaccine injury. So any adjuvant in the body, including the mesh, will provoke inflammation, and that can cascade to all of the systems. So very different for each person, but the main things that we see are fatigue, dysautonomia-like symptoms, tachycardia, even the depression, anxiety, the neurotransmitters are out of balance. There's that chronic fatigue, there's chronic pain, there's so many different symptoms. If you look up, just Google Asia syndrome and you'll see the list. So list of symptoms can be tied to so many diagnoses, but definitely a result of having a foreign body.
Gotcha. I was about to say the way that you just worded that at the end, I don't want to oversimplify it, but and I don't want to create fear for people either, because sometimes we need to do certain things. We get that. But
Yeah.
is it kind of fair to say then that anytime we have something foreign in our body, the body is subject to reacting to it? That's what it sounds like to me.
Absolutely. And that's
Okay.
the
Wow.
intention for the surgeries. Like you want that inflammatory response for healing, but it's when it's unchecked that it causes the problem.
Yep. Yep. I know even with, I brought this up earlier this week with the breast implant illness thing. It's very fascinating and kind of shows how powerful mold can be negatively if people are exposed to it long term. I know that some of the medications that they use for organ transplants to actually get the person's body to receive the organ is actually derived from certain molds because it's immunosuppressive. So,
Mhm.
really fascinating how that works. And then also scary on the other end, considering some of us, like myself, have been exposed to it for long periods of time. So, um, anyway, just going off on one of my other things. Next question. um, what else we got, guys? All right, Camille, can you speak to how long they stayed on the initial support? 2 months versus how you taper down on supplements for long term support. Is there a
Mhm.
general time point for follow up and when you retest, especially with an implant because of the ongoing insult?
Right, right. So I would say when you're addressing things like bacterial overgrowth, that's a longer process. So I would give that about a 6 month period of time before retesting. But if you want to see initial protocol um, with things like the MBA, the MWP, I would say around a 3 month mark would be optimal. Again, each client has to think what's in their budget bandwidth. And so you may not be able to do a retest at that time, but you look at the symptom scores and see that will give you enough information to see if you're in the right direction. And for to go back to like the initial protocol, it's intended to be a 3 month minimum. And then we taper things down one by one to see how the person feels. And if they don't feel well, then we bring it back in. But that's to do it without testing. And testing would really drive what we were going to change.
All right. Bree asked, where on the GI map test can we see the histamine markers? What other markers can factor into the levels for these ranges?
Yeah, that's another great question. So the histamine itself was on the mucosal barrier assessment, but in the GI map, again, looking at the species, the specific bacterial colonies that are there, there are several that are histamine provoking. So you would just kind of make that correlation there. If they were high in those particular strains, then likely they have a histamine intolerance or an imbalance.
Cool, cool. Um, what is the correlation between estrogen dominance slash estrogen in general and histamine?
That's a good question too. So for females, we'll say whenever we have that dip in estrogen, um, well, we'll say pre-ovulation, as we're getting the peak in estrogen, that seems to be hand in hand with histamine response. So they go together, and that might be a reason why menstrual cycling women will feel heightened histamine response at that time period. So there is a I mean, you could use that as a tool to get you by if those histamine responses are elevated, but maybe supplementing additional supports there are really being mindful about what you eat. For men, the correlation is not as distinct.
Awesome. All right, guys, we got about 6 more minutes of questions here for Sharon. And remember, we're going to jump in right to our last case study of the entire week. So please don't miss it. That's going to be with none other than Jen Maleka. So you guys will love her. Jen is awesome. She was our keynote speaker at our summer open house event in June, if you've been around. And if you have no idea what that is, well, stick around. You're going to like Jen. Okay, if clients have emotional health issues, do you refer them out to someone for mental health?
Occasionally, yes. So there are limits to what we can do, especially not being formally trained in that avenue. But there are so many things that we can build into a protocol to help that.
Gosh, killing me here. Sorry for the double play there, guys. We were supposed to have this all be on one stream, and it's not. So I guess you guys got a separate link for the course tour. We're going to go hop over there. I'm going to end this now, and sorry to end abruptly, but it looks like this was not the right link, so at least we've realized it 1 minute in today. I will see you guys over on the course tour. If you're like, Ev, how do I get to that? Just go to our YouTube channel, which is probably in the bottom right, and it's going to